Welcome to Good Employment Chatter. Today we are going to be talking about cultural transformation, and this is a topic that's linked into our awards events for this year. It's the first time we've had a category around cultural transformation, and we are delighted that we're joined by Dave Russel, who's the Chief Fire Officer of Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service today, who has had lots of experience in this particular area. So we're going to talk about some of his early career, some of the challenges that he's faced over the last few years, and just to learn some of his insights in terms of that cultural transformation journey that he has had. So welcome, Dave. It's an absolute delight to have you here, and very impressive reading about you as well to find out all about some of the things that you've been working on at Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service. But first of all, can you just tell us a little bit about kind of your journey in terms of how you became Chief Fire Officer at Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service, and what led you to apply for that role and motivated you to want to do that role as well?
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for having me. I joined the Fire and Rescue Service. It was actually Lancashire Fire and Rescue Service in 1991, so almost 33 years ago now. It seems a lifetime ago, and I think at the time I was 18 years when I joined, did A-levels and went straight into the fire service. So it was really the first sort of full-time job that I'd had, but I was driven by a real sense of wanting to help people. So I think being a firefighter is something that probably had harboured for quite a long period of time. I remember my mum and dad were trying to persuade me to go to university as an 18-year-old, but I was determined to join the fire service. I never really thought I'd end up in the role that I am in now. I never really have strived to become a chief fire officer. Obviously, I'd progressed through what is a rank structure similar to the military. But I joined Greater Manchester as its chief fire officer in September 2020. And I was driven by the advert, and the advert at the time really captivated me and pulled me in, because they were clearly looking for a leader that was really framed around inclusive leadership, a big focus on wanting to drive cultural transformation within Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service. And I think it was the advert, less the role, but being part of trying to deliver a Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service, which I believe over the last 4 years we've placed cultural transformation at the heart.
Definitely have. So were there particular things in terms of obviously the leadership, when you saw that role, that you thought, actually I feel like I can make that real difference? And were there roles within the fire service as you worked through the ranks that made you feel particularly equipped to do that role as well?
Yeah, certainly as I moved through the ranks, there's clearly a really structured programme of training and investment in leadership. And I think when I look back over 30 years, I've worked with good leaders, I've worked with bad leaders, and some were just indifferent. So I suppose, like anybody through the course of employment, I've taken things and picked them up and moved them forward. But culture is something that I care about deeply, and I do think that culture, above anything else in my time in Greater Manchester, will define my tenure as its chief fire officer, and it'll be my most important legacy. And I'm never going to be able to deliver all of the cultural transformation that I want, but I see myself as a custodian of the service and determined to hand it over in a better condition than I found it. And I think at the heart of our service are its people. And what I do genuinely believe is we cannot have a successful Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service without a strong culture.
Yeah, and culture is really, really important. So I'm kind of, it's really nice hearing you say about, you can hear the passion in your voice about how important culture is to you. And it's quite hard to define it as well, isn't it? But I guess that you think it goes back to your values and all of the things that have influenced you as well along that journey in terms of what you think is important, and then how you want to then ensure that the right culture exists as well.
Yeah, and I mean, certainly when I look back over my career, and of course, you know, I joined 3 decades ago, and you know, it was very different. Had, you know, a difficult start in the service, you know, subject to bullying.
Yeah.
But it just went hidden, unnoticed, etc. And I think certainly value, so honesty, integrity, respect, all of those things. I live and breathe that, and it's important to me, and it's important that I'm fostering and enable and striving for a culture within Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service where I don't think it's particularly complicated. I just want an environment where people can be the best self at work, feel listened to and respected. And I'm never going to gloss over the challenges that I faced in the 4 years that I've been in Greater Manchester, and I'm certain that I'll continue to face. But what we are driven by is making sure that our culture sits front and centre, and we live and we breathe those values on a day-to-day basis. And increasingly we've got a workforce that's got the confidence to be able to call it out and challenge it, in the knowledge that they are confident to be able to speak and say the truth, but more importantly they've got an organisation that's willing to hear it. So I think in the last 4 years I've been trying to pivot the service. You know, I'm smiling because it's an analogy that I use. It's like, I've seen it like an oil tanker, and you know, it's not very nimble. It's really hard to shift it on a different course in 2 degrees in a different direction. But I think with a much stronger sense of purpose, we've set a new course. We're on a new direction, and we are moving forward. I think my leadership in some respects is shaped through my childhood and my journey through the fire and rescue service. So fairness, equality, those things are really important to me, and I would hope that I'm working hard to present as an authentic leader to the 1,800 people that I'm responsible for.
Yeah, that's amazing. But like most leaders, do you ever like sometimes look in the mirror and think, gosh, I'm doing this huge job, look at what I'm achieving? Do you ever get that sense of imposter syndrome that many leaders have?
Yeah, daily is the answer to that. I don't think I've been anybody who I probably lack self-confidence. I'm not the sort of person to bust a door open and say, I'm here. I'm honest enough to say I'm quite reserved, but I don't think that should shy away from a really steel inner resilience about trying to move the organisation forward. You know, even now 4 years in, and you know, we've made progress as a service, I still sort of question my credentials to do the role of Chief Fire Officer, and maybe at times overthink things. And in some ways that will help me, in some ways it will hinder me. But I think in terms of trying to work through that, I think as much as I could let imposter syndrome almost subsume me, I think I can kind of push back against that with a belief that I'm doing the right thing. I've got a really good leadership team
I was going to ask you about that.
around me. This isn't about me, it's about them and others. And you know, I think we've got a collective real sense of purpose that I think probably balances my own sort of thoughts around fragility, and am I good enough for the job?
Yeah. And it is lonely being a leader, isn't it? And I was just going to say to you, have you got, you know, do you feel that you've got that good team around you that can give you the support as well? And obviously it's not just in the workplace, it's things that, you know, outside of work as well, having those kind of coping mechanisms in place and routines and structures. But you've obviously got a good team around you that are helping you, and they share your vision as well.
Yeah, I've got a really good team around me, and I think we've got a team that actually has got a really good level of diversity. Not just in the context of gender and but diversity of thought, which is really important, and worked hard to create an environment of challenge. So it's important that the team say, "Listen, Dave, you've got this wrong." And I think that makes for a really healthy dynamic. I think there are things that, when I look back, whether we talk about the Manchester Arena inquiry, I think that there's been some really tough periods, and I don't think I've ever been as tested as much in terms of leadership. Not that I'm just head of the organisation, but just some of the things we've worked through within Greater Manchester. But I think certainly just from a well-being and a wellness and, to support my own mental health, I think, running is a big part of my life. I smile, not that I do any particularly great thinking, but some of the clarity of thinking and unpacking problems that I might be wrestling with are probably done when I've got my running shoes out and I'm out and I've just got thoughts. And, sometimes I can start a run and end it, and the world can look quite different. And I can see a way through an issue we might be dealing with. And also, I think it's important to say, I think in my role, I genuinely feel I've got good political leadership and support in the mayor and the deputy mayor. So, I think it's makes for a really good, creative, innovative, supportive environment. So
would you say it's quite unique in terms of approaches by different fire services? Do you think Greater Manchester has? We always say that we are very collaborative in how we work across Greater Manchester, and it's different in other areas. So do you think that? I mean, you've been recognised for the work in Greater Manchester at national levels. It would differ a lot from other areas.
I think we do, and I think I would never say that we are doing anything better than anybody else. That's just not my style, but I do think we are doing things different. And probably about 2 years ago now, we adopted a culture first approach, and that really, in my mind, and hopefully within the organisation, meant 3 things. And that was about putting our values at the heart of everything we do. It should drive our decision making on a day-to-day basis. We display courage to hold a mirror up to ourselves in terms of what we're doing well, what are we not doing well, but more importantly, what are we willing to change. And I think that we grow Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service because we grow we develop our culture because we're growing our people. And within the service, we've got a culture first board. It's independently co-chaired by a lady called Sunita Gamblin, and that was a first, an absolute first for English fire and rescue services. But bringing in an outside perspective who's truly independent, operating as a critical friend, I think, has been an important part in terms of what we've been trying to achieve in respect of cultural transformation.
It's been amazing, So when you landed in Greater Manchester, you got the role that you'd obviously find very attractive and very appealing. What did you identify as the biggest cultural challenges initially? And, how did you set about kind of that vision in terms of what needed to change and what were the priorities?
So when I joined, as a country, we were in and out of COVID. So I think joining a new organisation in COVID was really challenging, and probably I felt a little bit lost at times because I was joining a new organisation, meeting lots of people on Microsoft Teams, not in a way where you would want to engage in a much more personable way. But the one advantage, and this is really important, and I think it unlocks certainly a lot of my thinking, the one area of the workforce that was at work during COVID were firefighters. working on fire stations. So in the first 100 days, I'd said to myself I was going to get across all of our 41 fire stations.
Yeah.
And I never stepped off a fire station within 4 hours. And I say that in a sense that it was though I'd unlocked a tap, I'd gone there, I was listening, I was trying to engage and give staff the space to tell me their lived experience within the service, and they did that with enormous candour, you know, loads of professionalism in terms of where they felt improvement. But whilst they described it differently, the key theme that anchored all of those conversations together was a clear disconnect, in my view, between frontline and senior leaders, senior managers, wherever you draw that line, but a disconnect and, you know, a repeated reference to them and us. And it was clear that what I needed to do, I think the organisation needed to buy into me, Dave Russell, and then Dave Russell, their Chief Fire Officer. So I think, you know, that was really important, and I think that those sessions certainly shaped my thinking. And, you know, bearing in mind, I joined the service on the day the public inquiry for the Manchester Arena started to sit for the first time to hear live evidence. I go as far to say at that point then the service felt lost. It genuinely did. But then I fast forward 4 years, and, you know, I am proud of what my staff have achieved, you know, with the most improved service in England, one of the best performing. But what I do believe, and I don't say this in an arrogant way, that's not my style. I think if GMFRS was a 6-speed gearbox, I think we've put the service into 4th gear. So the opportunity for growth and headroom and improvement and delivering better services to the people of Greater Manchester, there's a lot more to come from the organisation, which inspires me, it enthuses me, it excites me. And, you know, I'm incredibly proud of what the service has achieved and continues to achieve under the time that I've had the privilege of doing the job I'm doing.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And it's great that you were going round, you know, you've been to the fire station and you've listened to people as well. And the fact that, you know, you've obviously heard what they've said. And I guess some of that would have been quite difficult to hear as well, especially at the time that you went in. And then kind of taking that and putting that into action so people feel that they have been recognised and what they have said has been acknowledged has helped that journey as well. But you also talked a bit before about obviously the culture, but also about the kind of the well-being as well. And that's equally important, isn't it, in terms of looking after the staff. So you went in at a time when people were feeling very fragile. Obviously you've said about it was the time of the inquiry. So how are you kind of continuing that support around not just the physical health of the firefighters, because obviously that's an important part, that's a bit that generally as the public we see, but it's that the mental health and well-being as well, isn't it, that perhaps we don't always recognise is equally important in the role. So you've invested quite a lot in that, haven't you?
Yeah, we have, and I think probably again I'm making this point maybe just to try and give some sort of insight into my own thoughts and leadership. I think in the early period of the role, I genuinely felt overwhelmed. I'd leave work probably feeling a little bit lost in terms of the magnitude of the task ahead, but, you know, finding a way to work through it. But I think the point about well-being and wellness, and we see it now in sickness absence, you know, absence for mental health will outstrip musculoskeletal absences. So it's almost that what's driving the absence of has been recalibrated. So, you know, certainly our well-being services, the services we can provide through occupational health, the critical incident debriefing we're able to provide when firefighters go to a difficult incident are really, really important, because, you know, what I recognise is that people will be balancing the pressures of work, but also balancing the pressures outside of work and families and just society in general. And certainly wellbeing support, I think, is an area of growth for us moving forward. I think it's something that we can do more, have plans to do more, and there is a need to do more just to make sure that the workforce is as supported as it possibly can be.
And the approach to wellbeing has changed considerably. You know, I mean, COVID changed our thinking in terms of health and wellbeing. You know, we always kind of joke around the fact that years ago it would be, you know, a bowl of fruit in the kitchen area, but now people are really taking it seriously and looking at work-life balance and trying to ensure that, you know, that the workforce are looked after in all respects of their life, because they'll contribute better to the work that they're doing as well, won't they, if they feel better at home.
Yeah, and I think, you know, when I think about COVID and, you know, just trying to draw out some positives from it, I do think that for us as a service, accepting firefighters need to be at work on fire engines, but it has enabled us to work much more flexibly. So people who are not conditioned to riding on a fire engine but work in an office to have a much more flexible way of working. And I think, again, you know, I've spoken about running, you know, we're just close to completing an extensive rollout and refurbishment to all gymnasiums on fire stations, new equipment, because, you know, we recognise that exercise is important and it can play an important role within a person's own well-being, and it's important that that is built into the time available to firefighters during the course of the day or the night shift, to be able to exercise either independently or as part of a wider team. So,
and if I see you running, I know that you're going to be thinking through all your strategies, so I won't say hello to her until you ever see.
Well, I won't be able to catch you up, I don't think. That'll be it. But yeah, it's interesting when we were just having a chat, because I think what we were saying resonates, doesn't it? And
definitely.
I'm sure for those of us who run probably, think along the same way. So
definitely does. Yeah. You also mentioned earlier about inclusivity as well, and you've done a lot of work around making the service more inclusive, and, you know, even looking at the language that you use as well. So how do you see that work continuing, and kind of what vision do you have in terms of being more inclusive as a fire service? Yeah,
so I think at the heart of inclusivity, there's been, you know, phenomenal work done by our 5 staff networks, and what I really like about that, and just want to emphasise the point that I think inclusivity, it really needs to be bottom up. So, you know, we can write strategies, we can develop action plans, but, you know, this is culture's like a living, breathing thing, isn't it? And, you know, I genuinely think that whether it's the recruitment of firefighters from underrepresented groups, which we've made significant progress, but by no means, you know, there's still loads to do. The area around inclusivity and being part of an organisation that embraces diversity, it actively encourages it, and that is in a way to marginalise conversations. You know, we've had something around our service, our culture, conversations that we've pushed into the 4 corners of the service, and don't get me wrong, they haven't been easy conversations at times. They're not without challenge. The use of language is something, you know, that I've spoken about in terms of fireman, the firefighter, etc. And there are probably things that, you know, when I look back now, if I had the opportunity to try and make the point, I'd have gone about it in a different way. But all of it is coming from a good, you know, from a good place. And I think certainly the staff networks. We've got a cultural sounding panel,
Yeah.
A staff voice, and lived experience is really important, because I think it's that more than anything else, as opposed to strategy and action plans, that really has an opportunity to drive inclusivity, to have further innovation and creativity around culture. But in terms of where we are and where we're going, I think this is more evolution rather than revolution. I think we've put some really strong foundations in. You know, we're building back on those foundations. I think it's just, you know, keeping going. So, you know, if you work for Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service, you know, each year you go through in-person, I suppose, training awareness, which is about, this year was about strengthening our inclusive culture.
Yeah.
That was the title of the training, and I would hope it's delivered not in a parent-child way of trying to tell people, but more about trying to raise awareness and draw out differences of opinion, rather than let them be driven underground within the service. So bringing people's different views together and sort of trying to unpack it and understand where people are coming from, rather than in a way trying to control and tell people what to do and how to behave. And so you know, I think our future isn't driven by rules. It should be about the standards and the expectations that we impose on what one another. I think is the real thing. But of course, that presupposes, you know, people take ownership and accountability for their actions and behaviour. Yeah,
but it makes it a much richer experience for everybody if that diversity is there within the workforce as well, doesn't it? To hear those different views, to hear what other thoughts are, because it you know, can influence your thinking. It can make you think about different things. In terms of that voice and the employee voice, you've obviously done a lot of work to engage with the workforce. How are you kind of maintaining that and keeping that momentum going so that they feel that they're being heard, and that people feel that, you know, that there's opportunity there, you know, in terms of diversity as well, it'll lead to progression, things like that. What are you doing to make sure
so I think
connections there?
Yeah, when I sort of step back and look at this, I think I'd kind of framed in my mind, I don't know that we ever wrote it down, but there were sort of 7 pillars to cultural transformation. And I think the starting was about setting a really compelling vision, and then purposeful leadership. And I think they were cogs that I've worked really hard to turn. But I think in terms of maintaining it and sustainability, I think that then is about making sure we pass the baton on to our middle managers and our supervisory managers. So leaders who you know, if I think about watch and crew managers, so people who are in charge of fire stations and fire engines, they're the people who are managing 80% of the workforce. So in many respects, you know, staff take the lead and listen to them more than they do to me on a day-to-day basis. And I think it's through those leaders where we have invested in development, we have worked hard to engage with those leaders, that they really pick the baton up and make sure that what we have described, which, you know, is broadly around the vision, is actually being brought into their workplace on a day-to-day basis. And when I'd been through that full round of meeting staff and other things, probably about a year into the role, I set out 10 asks. I won't run through them, but they were not asks out of a leadership book or a book on cultural change. They were asks driven by, I guess, my reflections. But the final of those 10 asks was to ask yourselves the question regularly, and for me to ask that of myself is what is it like to be on the receiving end of you? Which I think if you stop to think about that, whether you're in a leadership role or, I don't know, it might be a one-to-one with a member of staff, I think it's a really powerful question. The other elements of those sort of 7 pillars is we have tried to wrap captivating comms around this. So we've tried to develop a We Are GMFRS.
Okay. Like an identity.
So, yeah. And we've had people from underrepresented groups, speak about that. Interestingly, we're trying to develop a We Are GMFRS podcast to sort of lift the bonnet on the service in a different way, but not to hear my voice, to hear the voice of staff. But I think that those comms elements come together in a way that we've got then a way of measuring progress. But when I strip it all back down and I think about engagement and learning, I throughout my tenure as chief, probably 10 times a year, we've got 10 boroughs, I'll go and spend a day on the back of a pump and do a day shift. Wherever I've gone, I've been really well received. And when I think about it, some of the best conversations I've had about learning about culture, what are we doing well? It might not be culture, it might be opportunities to improve, areas in training, have actually been on the back of a fire engine.
Yeah. When people are doing the job.
And I'm seeing it and they're talking to me, being themselves in a way that I'm not trying to usurp any line management, but what I am trying to do is remain connected as a leader. And whilst I'm not naive enough to think that those days alone tell me what it is like to be back on the front line, what I do think is if I wasn't doing that for me personally, I'd be missing out on something. So I think that there's a formal and there's an informal approach to this, and if you can bring it together. So I'm not doing those days to tick a box. I'm doing them there genuinely to invest in. No. But I think if they were, I think my staff would see through it.
Definitely.
They'd see through it straight away, and they'd just be rendered obsolete, and that hasn't been the case. So I think I'm about 30 fire stations through 41 stations. So
you're doing well then.
Well, I am, and when I do that, I think, why did I ever leave being a firefighter? So they've been really good days, and
there must be so much good camaraderie and support for each other when you're on.
It's
days
superb,
like that.
And I think what it does do is it really gets me back to the point that, listen, this is what it's about.
Purpose,
it's about service delivery. It's about helping the public, responding to incidents, talking to children in schools, improving fire safety in the home, protecting businesses, etc. I mean, I leave those days, and as I do most days, but with a real enormous feeling of pride.
Yeah, you should do as well. In terms of your managers, so they're obviously an important part of the bigger cog, and they are also helping in terms of changing that culture in the way that they're approaching other colleagues. You said that there's quite a structured kind of training process and training programs within the fire service. Have you had to tweak any of that so that they are behaving in a different way and managing people in a different way? Because, we've commented a lot about the fact that, after the pandemic, the role of a line manager has changed considerably. And it is about being, like you've said, your authentic self. It's about being empathetic and some of those softer skills. So have you kind of tried to change some of that formalised structure in the fire service to make sure it's bringing in those new values and approaches that you're wedded to?
Yeah, we have. And I suppose a really good example of that is if you join the service now and you join as an apprentice firefighter and you're on an 18-week training programme, the starting point isn't about how to put up ladders or operate pumps or handle equipment. The starting point is about learning and understanding and appreciating the organisation's values and why they are important. So I think that is quite a big change, to spend those early days or week in a classroom where culture and the importance of culture and the role model that you have as a firefighter, we've put that front and centre, and then everything else sort of follows from that. And then, in terms of the leadership training that we've provided, and there's still more to do. I'd never suggest that we've got everything right, but we did some time ago introduce what's called a frontline leaders course. So that's for people stepping into the first tier of leadership in a uniform setting. And again, I think sorts to draw in what you've described, but you can't make people authentic, can you? Or just plug somebody in and all of a sudden they're empathetic. but I think what we are able to do is to try and talk about that, and maybe try and provide a level of thought and insight and some tools and ways of approaching that. But also, I think maybe a appointment and selection process that is asking questions and trying to get under the skin of somebody in a way to measure that, rather than perhaps a more transactional way of asking a question and there's a yes or no answer. So I think we're coming at it from different angles.
Yeah, and if you're demonstrating, those skills or softer skills, and being more vulnerable and authentic and open, etc., then that obviously will cascade then to your other managers, and then it does kind of become embedded, doesn't it? It becomes a kind of a natural way.
Yeah.
But in terms of your recruitment, have you made changes in terms of how you recruit as well now? Because as a young person, I would thinking you're going to be a firefighter is a very attractive job. It's a tough job though, but you've talked about that inclusivity as well. So in terms of the approaches that you take now, are they different than they were perhaps 5 years ago?
Yeah, I think certainly the work of our recruitment team has changed, and I suppose there's two things here. We're providing a fire and rescue service in one of the most culturally diverse city regions in the country, and I think it's a reasonable expectation that the service, as part of the public sector, is working hard to employ people who reflect the diversity of Greater Manchester. So, there are programmes of work under the heading of positive action where we are lawfully and rightly targeting the opportunity of employment with underrepresented groups. That isn't designed or intended to be at the expense of a white male joining the service, but it is about making sure that employment pathways and opportunities are known and made available to
open to everybody, aren't
they? Who may not necessarily see that as a way forward. And I recall in 1991 I joined on my recruits course was with the first female firefighter in Lancashire, and you fast forward now, and of course there's still work to do, but the numbers of female firefighters within our service is a figure that is growing incrementally, and Yeah, I think it's the diversity of thought and how that can be used to strengthen a team, how that can enable people to think more creatively and innovatively, but also I think it gives us opportunity in terms of engaging with and accessing communities across GM in the broader sense.
Yeah, because if people can identify with a service and they can see themselves, they can visualize themselves being there, then that makes a huge difference, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's absolutely amazing. We know that there's been kind of a lot of recognition about the transformation that you've been leading over the past 5 years, and it is fantastic. You must be, well, you obviously are incredibly proud of that. How do you then also ensure that the workforce are kind of acknowledged and recognised for their contribution to that as well? Are there things that you do to sort of say well done to everybody?
Yes, well, I mean, I'm saying yes. I think that is certainly the case. So we have events around rewards and recognition. Staff, not just uniform staff, but non-uniform staff are recognised for service. So we've got long service and good conduct ceremonies. So those sorts of things that you'd expect. But I think for me personally, and I'm certain that this then permeates through the service, I think sometimes it's just those opportunities to say thank you in a way that may be unexpected, less formal, that arguably go a long way. So I think for me, in terms of trying to communicate in a really open, accessible way, and taking the opportunities to thank teams, thank individuals, that is something that's really important to me, but not in a way that is also consuming that actually it starts to mean not a great deal, a great deal, because every day I'm inspired by people who work for the service doing tremendous things, incredible level of commitment to public service. So I think we've got a reasonably good balance with that, but it isn't to say that we're not constantly seeking to further improve those opportunities to recognise staff and their achievements.
You've obviously got lots of kind of ambitious plans going forward, I'm sure, and that vision, I guess, is quite long term in terms of other things that you want to achieve. Are there some key things that you want to be kind of starting to focus on in the not too distant future?
Yeah, and I think when I joined the service, I suppose the plan was twofold, and it was about delivering our statutory core functions extraordinarily well, and secondly, delivering a more outward-facing Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service. And I think now, just in terms of the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, there are really real opportunities for the service in areas such as the Housing First project, property checks, and how that can complement the home fire safety visits that we do. There's work ongoing around MBAC, which is one of the Mayor's commitments, and looking at that as a route of employment and pathways into 999 services in the broadest sense. Live Well is a big agenda where I think we could cross-map lots of things that we do, but then also look with a longer-term vision of what we can do more. I'm a great believer that there's scope for the service to provide an emergency medical response. So that is an area that we're looking at, but an opportunity for firefighters on fire engines to be mobilised to an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest, where we know we can get a fire engine there quicker than an ambulance. It's not never instead of an ambulance, and we're never trying to substitute that. But what we do know is that every minute counts.
Yeah.
in the event of somebody experiencing
And you are
a
often
cardiac
first at the
arrest.
scene, aren't you, with when things happen as well?
Yeah, we are. So I think there's lots in that space. I think about the Vision Zero and the road safety strategy. Tragically, we lose more people in water-related drowning events than we do in fire. So opportunities to promote water safety, and I think particularly in a city centre region where there's lots of water courses.
Yeah,
and
there is.
Sadly, we've had a number of incidents, certainly within Manchester. But yeah, we're just currently out to consultation on a fire plan, which is a plan for the next 4 years. It's an 8-week public consultation, and I very much see that plan as an opportunity to write the next chapter in really the ambitions to deliver an outstanding fire and rescue service. And we've got all of the ingredients. I just think it's time that's needed to be able to play those things through. And our contribution to Greater Manchester in its broader sense gets bigger and bigger and better and better. And we're delivering a world-leading fire and rescue service. That's the ambition here.
And it's great that you've seen that connectivity with so many of the other Greater Manchester strategies as well, because they do all interplay with each other, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And that's one thing that I've found coming into Greater Manchester is how cohesive it is. And I think there's big advantages of the service being part of the Greater Manchester Combined Authority. I'd spoken about the political leadership and how the mayor and the deputy mayor are able to see opportunities, never distracting from our core function, but opportunities where I think we can add a greater level of public value. So I'm excited.
I think that sounds really exciting.
By that, and how we can sort of reach in, as you say, to other strategies in a way that is playing to our strengths, really, in terms of what we're able to do.
Yeah, and it leads to better efficiencies as well, and a better end service for users as well, doesn't it? If everything's connected. Yeah,
definitely. And I think at the end of the day, I spoke to you about being on a fire engine. I mean, that's what it is all about. And certainly in an incident setting, that is hugely important. But also, outside of that, bearing in mind that is about 6% of a firefighter's time responding to incidents. Training is important, but they are such positive role models, whether it's working with children and young people.
Definitely within the community.
Yeah, trying to engage people about fire safety in the home, or, working with businesses to protect people in the high-rise buildings that are around the studio we're sat in. Yeah, there's so much to...
There's more to it than people realise. Do you think we'll have yellow fire engines at some point?
Well, I sincerely hope not. I think there's something about sort of protecting the brand here, isn't there? But maybe who knows?
I'm only teasing the connectivity into the wider geo.
Yes,
Who knows?
Yeah.
No. One of my last questions, Dave, is just to ask you, and we ask this to all of our guests, if you could think of one person, past or present, that you'd love to have a coffee with, and why?
Okay, well, I've been thinking about this. It's a tough, but I'm gonna go for JFK,
right?
And I say that on the basis that in 2012, I had the privilege of going on a leadership development course for 3 weeks at the JFK School of Government in Harvard. It was in Boston. I was the only European delegate. They were predominantly NYPD, fire service, etc. But I was submerged in this building that had quotes of Kennedy.
That must have felt quite surreal.
Yeah, and I think he I mean, for many things, but the one thing that I did read on the walls was he was talking about that leadership and sort of learning, were so intertwined. And I think having spent 3 weeks in that building, what I would say to him, I'm not too sure, but yeah, I think that he'd be somebody who I'd be really intrigued and perhaps inspired to listen to. I think particularly in terms of his leadership at the time as president in the United States. So
I think he'd be interested to hear about your experiences. It's been amazing. You're doing an absolutely brilliant job, you and the fire service, and congratulations again on your King's Award as well that you received. That's an amazing achievement as well. You must have felt absolutely kind of awesome about that.
Yeah, I did. And again, I kind of sort of play these things down. I think I've got that award because of the staff who work in the service. So I think it's as much to me as it is to them. Yeah, I as I say, I think I'm indebted to what staff do, not just firefighters, staff in prevention, protection, training. We've got a great team out there. Brilliant people doing brilliant things on a day-to-day basis, and we've got to make sure that we continue that.
Carry on.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you've got the drive and the determination to carry on, and lots of things to think through still. But it's amazing to look at how far it's come in that 5 years that you've been there. And I think everybody will be looking forward to hearing more about what you've got planned going forward and seeing how that transpires as well. So absolutely brilliant and well done. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, no, thank you.
I know your time's valuable.
Yeah, no, thank you ever so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
No, it's been fantastic. So yeah, we've really enjoyed it as well. And hopefully we'll get you on another one in the future.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.